Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show this week in WordPress and SaaS, where we cover the world of WordPress and Bootstrap SaaS founders and people trying to make a living out of WordPress or their startup SaaS. We've got a great guest this week. We've got Paul Charlton, the founder of WP-Tuts, one of the largest YouTube channels. I watch it myself, so does Stephen. I'm excited. We're going to be talking about YouTube, Gutenberg, Elementor, a host of really interesting subjects. So, Paul, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the WP-Tonic tribe?
Absolutely. First of all, let me just say thank you for having me on. It's an absolute pleasure. So basically, my name is Paul Charlton. I run a YouTube channel called WP-Tuts, if you're not familiar with it. And the whole point of the channel is helping you create more powerful, more comprehensive, and more complex WordPress websites by expanding beyond the basics and encompassing tools like advanced custom fields, creating your own listing websites, dynamic websites, so just basically helping you to either improve your own personal skills, or if you run this as a business, to improve your possibility to earn good income by going beyond what your typical WordPress developer or web designer can actually do. And that's kind of the foundation behind the channel and what I tend to do with WordPress.
That's great. And I've got my great co-host, Stephen Saunders. Stephen, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the new listeners and viewers?
Yeah, my name's Stephen Sauter from hustlefish.com. We help agencies make WordPress simple by handling hosting, maintenance, and web dev.
And before we go into the main part of this exciting interview, I got a message from our major sponsor. We'll be back in a few moments. We're coming back. I also want to point out that Castos is doing a fantastic deal. If you go to the WP-Tonic/newsletter, you'll be able to see that offer, which is basically 6 months at half price, exclusively for the WP-Tonic tribe. So, Paul, let's start off. So, you've got this fantastic channel. You've put tons of work into it. I've learned a load from you. I look forward to your new YouTube videos. So, on this road to YouTube domination, what are some of the lessons that maybe you could share with the listeners and viewers that you wish you had known at the start of your YouTube journey, Paul?
Find a real job.
I told Stephen you would say that, actually. You owe me money now, Stephen.
Stephen, I'm just saying nothing. No, I mean, probably the thing I wish I'd known right back at the beginning was to focus on a specific niche. You know, a lot of people will go into creating YouTube channels and they have a love of something like vehicle repairs, or in my case, web design and things. And then you'll try to be all things to all people. And the problem with that is nobody really knows what it is you're trying to do, including yourself. So for me, I think if I'd thought about this and planned it a little bit better, with hindsight, which we know is 2020, I probably would have focused straight away on creating dynamic web design, you know, using tools like WordPress, advanced custom fields, those kinds of things. But alongside that, I think WordPress itself and the ecosystem around it has moved on so much over the last 24 months that there are so many more tools that make it much more accessible to be able to create the things that right back at the beginning of my YouTube journey may have been a lot more complex and a comprehensive sort of topic that may have sort of like alienated some people. Whereas now I think the topic is so much more broad with so many more tools that make it much more accessible for everybody. And you can definitely see that if you take a look at the tutorials that I created probably 3 years ago compared to where they are now. Tools like Elementor, tools like Jet Engine, you know, advanced custom fields, all those kinds of things. They are getting much, much easier and much more accessible for so many more people, which I think is fantastic. So, yeah, I think my biggest lesson, my biggest takeaway right back at the beginning would have been niche down, find out what people want to learn about and focus predominantly on that. There's nothing wrong with looking at areas around it and complementing the skills that you're trying to impart. But I definitely think focusing on that niche would have been the best thing right back at the beginning for me.
Have you got any insight about how you find out, I totally agree with you, Paul, but have you got any insight about how people find out what the audience really wants from the channel?
Yeah, I mean, this is an art and a science in its own right. And there are some great tools out there that help you sort of find out what people are asking, questions that are sort of being asked on places like YouTube. And I think one of the best places is look at the channels that you aspire to be like, in whatever niche that you're actually looking to get into, and become involved in the comments, the feedback that other creators are getting, and see what the people that are actually involved in the comment section are asking and not getting answers to. Because as a YouTube creator, you create a video, you put it out there, and you get lots and lots of questions that can be related to that topic, but you also get a lot of questions that are not related to that specific topic, and they can often go unanswered. And I think there's a lot of really useful information to take away from the comment section on a YouTube video, getting involved in the Facebook groups for Elementor, for advanced custom fields, for WordPress, whatever kind of thing you want to niche down into. Look into those places, see the questions that are being asked coming up time and time and time again, and then look at answering those questions, because there's already a market, an audience there looking for answers to that that's not being served. So that's what I would suggest, especially at the beginning of your journey, where you have no reputation, no audience, no viewership, and no clout, should we say, in the industry that you're trying to get into. So look into there, be as helpful as possible, become involved in all these different areas, and create content around the questions that you see are being asked again and again and again.
When you first started diving into the YouTube creation platform, what were you focusing on? You said you wish you would have niched down earlier, but was it still WordPress? Was that still a niche, or was it wider than that? What was that spectrum that you covered at the beginning?
Well, the funny thing was, I originally started a totally different channel, and I still have 3 channels. I only actually focus on the WordPress one right now. But the first one that I did was all to do with music production, because I've had a real passion for creating music in a home studio environment where people, don't have huge budgets, but they still want to get great results. So that's kind of where I started. I like to take my passions, and as I learn things, then I create content around those things to help other people that have probably stumbled upon exactly the same things that I stumbled upon trying to learn. So when I kind of moved into the WordPress side of things, what I was doing was, at the time, I was working with Visual Composer, which is a page builder that was very popular at the time. So I created content on Visual Composer, and don't get me wrong, it got good viewership, it got good traction. It's still one of my top videos with over 350,000 views on one of them from 2 years ago, which is pretty decent. Which is kind of ironic for a platform that doesn't really get used anywhere near as much as it did 6 or 7 years ago. So, I mean, my background is teaching. I spent 10 years as an IT trainer, and I used to take my passions into the education sector, create courses around that, and then find people that were interested in that and get them to come and fill my courses up. And the natural progression from there was to combine that with video and just make a platform that allowed me to reach more people, while still working a sort of 9-to-5 job as a web designer and graphic designer kind of thing. So that's kind of what that's how I kind of ended up getting onto YouTube. That's how I kind of ended up going into this particular sector, just taking the things that I was learning day to day and thinking, right, okay, other people can make a business out of this the same as I'm doing. So how can I show people what they need to know to level up as quick as possible to start generating revenue, whether that's from friends and family or local businesses or whatever. And that's always been my passion, is to take things that I can learn and just share them in any medium possible and help other people do the same thing, but quicker.
Yeah. Was that niching down process like an organic thing that happened, or was it a very deliberate decision that you had to make?
It was fairly organic, to be honest. I mean, if I go back to when I was a web designer, one of the sort of first things I did was I created my own content management system. So as part of that, you kind of understand relational databases, you understand the whole dynamic side of things. And as ACF and advanced custom fields and tools like that became more accessible to more people, and tools like Elementor opened up the doors to working with dynamic content and making that easier. It was a natural progression for me to kind of combine WordPress alongside those tools to create something that I didn't see was being served very well. But that was more a case of stumbling into it, finding that it wasn't being served very well, and finding that there was an audience for that more advanced WordPress kind of topic. So there have been certain aspects of my YouTube channel that have definitely been, specifically thought out, planned out in advance. But there's also a lot of just organic stumbling upon things, and then going with them and taking them further than that initial finding sort of like led me to, if that makes sense.
So, what are how much time do you spend each week on this YouTube channel, this beast, Paul? And what are some of the key equipment or software that you use to help you produce your fantastic videos, Paul?
Right. How long do I spend on it? If I go back to when the pandemic hit, shall we say, which is about 20 months ago, something like that. Most of my clients are sort of self-serving. In other words, I've created content management system, or I built them around WordPress and so on, so they don't need me on a day-to-day basis. So I kind of looked at what was going on in the UK at the time and thought, right, I can see where this is going. My business is going to kind of flatline for the foreseeable future. So what do? That led me to double down on the YouTube channel. So I went from doing on average 2 videos a week to doing 5 videos a week. I kind of thought, right, I'm going to put all my efforts into this now, because this is something that I can grow, that gives me control over this. I don't need to be looking for new clients. I don't need to be looking for, sort of serving those businesses that are probably struggling because they don't know when they're going to be able to make money. So I kind of doubled down on that side of things, went into creating videos 5 days a week. That sort of took up, as you can imagine, a huge chunk of my time. But with regards to the equipment that I use, I basically, in the last year, pretty much a year to this month, I moved everything over to Apple. And the key reason for that was when they brought out the M1 chip, that was getting great sort of feedback with regards to working with Final Cut Pro. And prior to that, I was Premiere, using all the Adobe suite and so on. So moving over to that means that I can produce content, the editing side of things, much, much quicker than I could do when I was working with a very high spec PC, but working with Premiere, which if you've ever used it, you'll know it gets very sluggish very quickly. So I've kind of streamlined the business side of things so I can create content now much, much quicker. I've recently built a studio that's dedicated to working on the videos, which is where I am right now, which means that I can have my gear set up and ready to roll within minutes. So I can literally sit in the house with a laptop. I can plan out what I want to do, test things out on the laptop, and then I can literally come out, set things up, and I can be up and recording in 5 minutes, and then I can go through the whole process of creating content. So the amount of time I spend on it, it is my full-time job now. I mean, that's without a shadow of a doubt, it is my full-time job. I've moved over to content creator. I don't like saying YouTuber because there's a certain connotation comes with being called a YouTuber. So I'll just say I'm a content creator. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of where I am right now. It is my full-time job.
So when you're sitting down to create a tutorial, a couple of years ago, I was like, hey, I'm going to start creating some content. I sat down, created a couple of tutorials, went back, watched them, threw them all out. They were terrible. What is your process? How do you?
It never stopped me, Stephen. I just throw it up on YouTube.
Hasn't stopped me either.
But like, do you script things out? Do you run through a couple ideas of how you're going to approach something? From when you have the idea to when you're actually filming it, like what does that process look like?
I'll say yes to all of the above. Basically, I have no set plan to how I work on things. It all depends upon whether it's a quick video, sort of like an opinion piece, which literally I'll just sit down with whatever software or tool that is that I'm kind of looking at, and I will literally just go through it on screen with whoever's watching, whether that's live or whether that's being pre-recorded. And I'll give you sort of my warts and all thoughts and opinions. If I stumble across something or stumble on something, I'll just leave that in there. Then you've got the sort of more planned out content where I'll have an idea of what I want to do. I'll run through the basics of it just so I can get it into my head, the process. And then depending upon the complexity of it, I'll sit down and I will create a checkpoint list of what needs to be done in order. And they'll just literally be bullet points. Maybe I'll flesh things out if there's a couple of extra sections that need to be highlighted to make sure I don't miss those points, because as you probably know, you could miss one checkbox in the first 10 minutes, and then an hour into the video, you've got to go back because you forgot to check something, and that has a massive knock-on effect. So I'll do that kind of thing for the more comprehensive tutorials, like where I do the how to build like a listing website or a real estate website or something. And then there's things that are much more comprehensive, at which point I will generally tend to script out these sections in between that have my introduction, and then each segment in between will be scripted out so I can use that as a segue to the next piece of screen recording. But I've kind of just literally, in the video that I put up today, which is the first one like it, I've changed things over slightly. And what I'm doing now is I'm actually recording everything on camera that you can see right now. I'm recording the screen at the same time with the microphone going through my screen recording software. And then I'll actually cut in between. So it makes more sense to be a little bit more, when I need to be showing something on the screen, I can show something on the screen and I'll screen capture that. But the bits in between where traditionally I would have been still, the screen capture going on and me talking, which can have nothing actually going on screen. Now you'll have me talking to camera. So I'm always streamlining the process. I'm always looking for ways in which I can become faster at what I'm doing. I can turn things around quicker. I can increase the production quality without increasing the amount of time that I spend on it. So it really does come down. And if it's sort of like sponsored content, I'm working with a brand or a company, then it depends what the relationship's like with those. Like, for example, with Crockerblock, who I work with quite a lot, then I'll have an outline of what they want, and I will go through and hit the key points, submit it to them, make sure they're happy with that I've hit those key points. And if not, I'll add something extra in there just to make sure that those key points are met. But yeah, it's really quite a fluid sort of way of working. And like I say, I'm always looking for ways in which I can streamline my process just to make the quality better, the speed and the time it takes me to sort of like produce content, just, more fluid, should we say, a little bit streamlined.
Well, that's great. I think we're going to go for our break. When we come back, we're going to be delving into what Paul thinks of Gutenberg, Elementor, where he feels WordPress is going. Should be another fascinating conversation. We'll be back in a few moments. We're coming back. You've got some other fantastic sponsors, messages that you've been listening to. Please go to WP-Tonic /newsletter. You see some special offers there around our great sponsors. So, Paul, it's been a windy road when it comes to Gutenberg, but we do. I've been a little bit critical, but not of the concept of Gutenberg, just how long it's taken to get to where we are. But that's fine for me. I'm not trying to build a new engine as the plane's flying, am I? Yeah. So where do you feel Gutenberg is at the present moment, and where do you think it's going to be by the end of 2022?
Where do I think it is at the moment? I think that Gutenberg is really only becoming a useful tool through the advent of third-party companies coming on board and filling the huge gaps that I can't term it a page builder, because it's not a page builder. Yeah. If you ask me, and this is my own personal opinion, nobody else's, is it's okay. It's great for creating blog content, and that's fine. When you go beyond that, you start to need adding in third-party tools to actually. There's just too many gaps in it. It's really, really very basic. And 3 years in, could you imagine a page builder company come along and charge you money for this? And 3 years in, this is where they were. So.
Well, you wouldn't. But it's difficult, isn't it? I sense you try and be, I'm struggling now for the right word, Paul. You try and be balanced. and fair. But, my feeling about this is it's been a bit of a train wreck in some ways. What would you agree with that? What's your feelings about how it's been handled?
Yeah, I think handled not very well. If you ask me, the first thing they should have done, and like I say, I'm not telling them what to do at the end of the day. It's their business and they can decide whatever direction they want to go in. For me, and I've said this all along, they would have been so much better to have either bought out a company that was a page builder, maybe a smaller page builder, but a company that has a track record in understanding how to
Beaver
develop
Builder.
something. I'm saying nothing. But has a track record of being able to build effective, easy to use page builders and then utilize either their technology or their skills, knowledge, and understanding of that type of system that they need to put in place. Because if you look at Gutenberg as it is, 3 years in, it's still incredibly clunky. You want to do simple things and it's not easy. The fact you've got such a massive disconnect between what you see on screen when you're actually creating content to what you see on screen on the actual website's front end, that's like going back 6 or 7 years ago, back to a page builder like Visual Composer, which everything was made out of blocks. You literally had to keep switching back and forth between those two different areas to see what it is you were doing. And that makes the whole process less intuitive, more time consuming, and just really not a good experience. I mean, we're all so used to everything being what you see on screen is what you're going to get. Your header's there, your footer's there, your layout is there. Your whole templating system is visible as you're editing content. So you can make decisions in real time. And Gutenberg doesn't give you any of that. And I don't see it ever being in a position where it's going to give you that. As for where do I think it's going to be at the end of 2022, pretty much where it is now and where it was this time last year. We might get, I don't know, some typography settings or something, earth-shattering like that. Full site editing. Nice idea, but surely it would have made more sense to have completed the actual builder part of it before they started trying to build the second phase, which is now adding even more complexity into your experience of designing something, where you have to use a specific type of theme, one that supports full site editing. You have to then learn how Gutenberg is going to work with full site editing while working in the back end of things and going back and forth. It's just not a nice experience. I don't think so anyway.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging. It feels like I remember when at State of the Word, when Matt was talking about Gutenberg when it was first coming out and like trying to address the issues of like somebody trying to get like an image line to the left and their text line to the right and how people just don't know how to do that. And it feels like if that's where that was the trajectory, they hit that, right? This weird in between spot between a page builder and their old editor. But then it got billed and sold as like a actual page builder, which part of me feels that like maybe it was never supposed to be that. But that was the perception and the anticipation that everybody had. And so now it's in this weird place in between these two worlds that feels strange.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't help themselves by working on full site editing. I mean, they might have started out as it not being a page builder per se, but the reality is once you put full site editing in, you make it a page builder by its very nature. You now have control over the page content and the design using the same type of tool. So they dug the hole, and maybe they should have stopped digging 2 years ago. And you've got to ask yourself, why is the classic editor still so much more highly rated than Gutenberg and so many downloads compared to people using Gutenberg? There's a reason behind these kinds of things. I don't think it's just nostalgia.
What is currently your favorite like WordPress stack? Like if you're gonna point somebody in a direction to build a site, like and with like a page builder or classic editor or Gutenberg, like what are the plugins that you would point them to install?
You're asking Paul to commit suicide. Publicly asking him to choose a page builder from 50. But it's up to Paul. Off you go, Paul. Commit suicide.
I'm normally pretty vocal when it comes to these things anyway. I think it all kind of comes down to lots of different types of decisions and what you actually want out of what you're trying to do. I don't think there's any perfect stack, because I think if you are someone that wants to create dynamic content and you want to do that inside a page builder, you have specific ones that you can use. I mean, whether we like it or not, Elementor is still the top one there for working inside that. But then close on the heels of that coming up, I think we all need to be keeping an eye on Brix Builder, because that is definitely taking on some of the big boys at their own game. You know, if you look at a lot of the feedback with regards to people that use the different tools, there's a lot of people getting really frustrated with the likes of Elementor, for example, that they don't feel like they feel like there's a disconnect between what users want, you know, pro level users. We're not talking about your hobbyist or someone that's doing a site for their own business. I'm talking about people that run agencies, or, you know, they're doing this as a bigger business kind of thing. Then if you look at something like Brix, they're doing the opposite approach. They're listening to what's being said. They're taking on board what makes sense and not just putting everything in there, not throwing everything, including the kitchen sink, at it and seeing what sticks. They're looking at, okay, what makes the builder better? What makes the builder something that would steal market share from those people that are not being currently served? And I think they're going the right way. So for me, it's not there yet. There's still gaps it need to fill, especially when it comes to dynamic content, but it came out of the gate swinging. And I think that's something to keep an eye on. Elementor is probably still the top one that I would suggest for most people to use, especially, like I say, if you want to go into the more advanced designs where you want to create your entire site, you want to customize all WooCommerce, you know, those kinds of things. Plus the ecosystem that's around it is massive. You know, you want to go way beyond what Elementor could do. Then you've got, you know, sort of software like dynamic content for Elementor. You've got the Crockablock suite. All those things give you massive amounts of possibilities, all wrapped up in sometimes hard to learn, but putting the time and effort in pays dividends. And that's the whole point of why I've created so much content around those kinds of tools, is to impart the knowledge, sort of the stumbling blocks that I've come across over the sort of like the years. So I don't think there's a perfect stack. I mean, you've got to look at Oxygen, for example. It's a much more developer focused. I don't say you need to be a developer to use it, because that would be wrong. But if you have a background in HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, you will get on so much better with a platform like Oxygen, and you'll be able to get so much more out of it because of the way it's been built to cater for those kinds of things. But if you're a beginner, you can still get a lot out of it. You'll just get more by knowing more. When it comes to some of the other ones, Divi is playing catch up, because I think it's set the rest on its laurels for way too long. Beaver Builder is very niche, and I don't really know it well enough to comment on it. I do want to spend some time, but I know a lot of people that use it will swear by it, because it's built around stability. And in the WordPress ecosystem, stability counts for an awful lot, especially if you are making money and charging people to build sites for them and those kinds of things. So for me, like I say, I think it would still have to be Elementor for most use cases, depending upon where you are on the sort of the ladder. And then if you want to go beyond that, then I would say probably keep an eye on something like Brix, and also take a look at Oxygen. So I might have just dug myself a grave, but hey.
Well, you threw yourself in it, but there we go.
Yeah.
Like yourself, I've got broad shoulders. I get the impression that you have. Let's get back to the Gutenberg before we wrap up the podcast part of the show and go on to the bonus content. I've also got some questions from the live audience that I will be putting to Paul in the bonus content. But let's wrap up the podcast discussion. Let's go back to Gutenberg, Paul. So I totally agreed with your comments around Gutenberg, but can the third-party providers, can they come on the white horse and rescue this project? They seem to be doing it. It does, but I totally agree. It's actually the add-on plugin providers that are really getting it to a stage where it could be considered usable in any way. Yeah. First of all, would you agree with that? And what are some of the key players that are coming to the rescue of this project, Paul?
Absolutely, I would 100% agree with that. I think without these third-party add-ons, Gutenberg would just be floundering even more so than it currently is. So the main players, I would say you've got to look at Stackable. I know there's been a bit of a thing around version 3 because they've changed the way a lot of that works to allow for the future expansion. But I think they're doing a fantastic job of that. Their dynamic integration with that is also opening a lot of possibilities. So I really want to see how companies will run with that side of things, because that is something that's definitely underserved, and I don't really see Gutenberg ever really addressing that above, you know, where you've got the loop and things like that that was added recently. You've also got cadence blocks. Obviously, that's doing really, really well. You've also got Guten blocks. Is it Guten block? No, generate blocks. I do apologize. That's a really solid platform for doing your initial building side of things. And we know that the Generate Press has a really good sort of reputation for creating a great theme. And I think their blocks plugin is definitely doing the same kind of thing. So for me, they are some of the big players that I think you need to keep an eye on. You know, there are lots of other ones like, I think it's Equid and stuff like that out there, which I don't really use that much. But yeah, they're the things that are making Gutenberg more usable, because at this point in time, Gutenberg on its own, if you open that up just as the plain, I say editor, just as that, you just look at it and you go, well, what can I do with this? You know, I can change the text, I can adjust some colors, and I can put a button in. I've got some really, really dodgy looking image effects I can apply. What else can I do? You know, and that's it. I think if you're a designer, you just look at that, and that's like just giving an artist a pencil and saying, get on with it, you know, do the Sistine Chapel with a pencil. You know, it's just, it would be laughable if it wasn't something that was out of our controls to accept or reject, you know? And I think that's the sad thing about it. So yeah, third-party plugins and companies, I think they are going to be, as you say, the white horse that's going to make it a usable product for most users.
Yeah, this is but you're not on message, Paul. You got to understand that people use WordPress because of Jetpack. So you're like me, Paul. You're just not on message. This is the problem, Paul.
Story of my life.
All right, there we go. So, Paul, how can people find out more about you and your thoughts and what you're up to?
Well, there's a couple of different ways. Easiest place would be obviously on YouTube. Just do a search for WP-Tuts. That's WP-Tuts. And you should find over 600 videos on there. There's also a really active Facebook group, which again, you can just do a search for WP-Tuts, and that will come up on there. And you can follow me on Twitter, again, WP-Tuts, but with a Z at the end of it. Just do a search for WP-Tuts. I'm everywhere. So if you want to sort of get involved in the conversation, and I say I'd love to see you over on the Facebook group, because that has over 7,000 really, really solid users. It's a fantastic atmosphere, and that's just a great place to be. So any of those platforms, and you can find me and you can get involved.
Yeah, I just want to say, you know, I've learned a lot from your videos. You just do a fantastic job, Paul. So, Stephen, how can people find out more about you and what you're up to, Stephen?
Head over to hustlefish.com, and if you need any help with WordPress, be sure to reach out.
And if you want to find out more about WP-Tonic, the podcasts, the YouTube, the content, it's basically sign up for the newsletter, WP-Tonic / newsletter, and also join us on the WP-Tonic WordPress Mastermind group, where you find all the crowd from the Friday show contribute content, answer questions, really experienced in the WordPress ecosystem. Please join us there. We'll be back next week with another fantastic guest. Remember to watch the bonus content, which you can watch on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye. So bonus content, Paul. Got a question from Richard Wade. Have you got any plans? And it's kind of linked. I had a quick look at Wix, but I was actually surprised it's moved on since 18 months ago that I last looked at it. It was quite impressive. You've got Squarespace. Do you have plans to look at, what's your thoughts about, you know, this is one of the problems because the competition have moved on much quicker than Gutenberg, really. What do you feel of Wix, Squarespace? Have you got plans to stay in the WordPress ecosystem? You know, keep clean and pure, Paul, or are you going to go to the dark side, Paul?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with the dark side. I think probably Webflow would be the one I would take a look at, and maybe Editor X. Just because I think, and I've said this in my own live streams and different sort of conversations and things, I don't think WordPress is the be all and end all. I don't think it's right for every situation. I think you've got to look, especially if you're working with clients, you've got to look at what the client's requirements are and then find the right solution for them and not just shoehorn them into WordPress because you know WordPress well. So I do have plans to take a look at it. It all comes down to when, and there's only so many hours in the day, and branching out into a completely new market sector, it makes it more difficult. So I think even if I do branch out into those to start off with, it'll be more comparative to sort of see how does that compare to the likes of, your page builders inside WordPress, inside the ecosystem, those kinds of things. So at some point, yes, Wix, the normal Wix, I can't ever see me going in to take a look at that side of things. But I think like Editor X, which is a little bit more exciting, that is a lot more like the page builder type experience crossed with Webflow, kind of hybrid between those two kind of ecosystems. That's kind of interesting. And I think that's been maturing quite nicely behind my scenes, should we say, for the last 18 months, 2 years since I last looked at it. So I'll never say never, but I mean, at the end of the day, my audience and what I kind of create is WordPress centric. So I would say never, but it's when the time is right.
I'll stay with the Rebel Alliance, Paul. Don't go over to the dark side. The force is strong, Paul. So over to you, Steve.
When you first started the YouTube channel and we're thinking about marketing and how to grow it, like, did you start the YouTube channel to try to drive like web business to like your like personal web design stuff, or was it just a completely separate business that you decided to kind of take on?
Completely separate. If I'm honest, I never really looked at it as being a sort of another outlet for generating potential customers or clients. By its very nature, I've been contacted by lots, but if I'm brutally honest, I've kept the two worlds, should we say, totally separate. So even though I've been asked on numerous occasions to get involved in, consultancy, working on client projects and things, I don't really want those two worlds to kind of cross over into each other. I like to keep my business side of things when it comes to serving my existing clients in one kind of separate box, should we say, and then my WordPress and any kind of like business relationships I have with that is a separate thing. I think kind of crossing those over for me is not an area that I've really wanted to go into. So no, it was never the intention. YouTube started off, to be honest, as just an outlet for me to get back into teaching because I missed that side of things. I really did enjoy that 10 years of doing it. Was part of the sort of like one of the nicest parts of my life. So this kind of gives me the ability to combine that aspect and create a community around a sort of shared passion side of things. And that's, I think, one of the nicest things about WP-Tonic is a fantastic community behind it, not just a YouTube channel now.
Do you think you'll ever launch your own plugin or product, or is that mixing the two worlds? There's several other YouTubers like yourself, right, that have like started going down the route of building content. They created a community and ultimately launched some product inside of that community.
I've got no plans, and I can't say that I've really thought too much about it. I've been asked by a couple of companies that have already produced their own products that are sort of like in their early infancy if I'd like to come on board. But for me personally, at this point in time, I kind of feel like there'd be a bit of a conflict of interest there, because if I'm standing up and saying this product is the best thing since sliced bread, or PS, by the way, I'm behind it, I lose credibility straight away, in my opinion. Like I say, I'm only talking about how I would look at myself if I was doing that. And my reputation is more important than any product that I could produce. I would much rather stay at this point. I say in the future, the next 5 years, who knows? But at this point in time, I think the only kind of products that I would like to create would be educational products. There would be webinars, training, that could go beyond what I could put together in a YouTube video and then offer support and a sort of like a network, one-to-one, those kinds of things. So that would be the direction I think I would go in, and not so much product-based unless it was something that I think there was a real need for, that no one was filling that market. And then I don't think I could market it myself as me, if that makes sense. I would rather sort of take a step back and let someone else deal with the marketing side of things, take myself out of the picture.
It's funny enough that you've touched this area, because it was the question I'm going to put to you now. I don't know for a fact, but I would imagine you're putting a lot of time into this. Obviously, you want to make a reasonable living from it. I would imagine you make most of your income from affiliate marketing. How do you deal with the good side and the bad side of affiliate marketing, i.e., around editorial balance and independence, but also the need to provide an end result for those affiliate partners that you're working with? Got any insight about that? I feel that you've done it in a very good way, in a very clear way, but what's your thoughts around that, Paul?
If we let's take two sides to this, because I think there's like kind of two sides to this coin. There's straight up affiliate marketing, which basically means that I see a product that I like and I'll use my affiliate link if I create content around it. And then there's the sort of the affiliate side of things when I might collaborate with a company. So if I kind of answer those two questions separately, I think it'll make a bit more sense. And chances are I'll forget the second by the time I come back to it, so just remind me. The first one, when it comes to any kind of affiliate side of things where it's literally me demonstrating a product, should we say, I only ever create educational content around it. I don't create, what can you say? I don't do any kind of review content or anything that I've been paid to do, or I have affiliate marketing side of things. I've been contacted by a company, if that makes sense. If I create a review side of things, and I've literally only started doing reviews over the last couple of weeks, and that's because so many people ask me, what's your opinion? What's your opinion? What's your opinion? I'll either have bought that myself or it's free. So it's one of those things, it's one of those golden rules that I've always had, is that that's the way I like to keep things separate. So then anybody that's looking at anything that I put out there will see that I'm not giving you my opinion when it's educational. I don't think I need to, because if you are watching that video on how to do something with product X, if you think that actually answers the need that you have, then you can basically go ahead and purchase that if you want to, or download it if it's free. And a lot of what I cover is absolutely free. So I've always been totally transparent about that.
Yeah, you have.
When it comes to working with companies, let's just say, for example, like dynamic content for Elementor, or dealing with like, Crockablock and things like that, my stance is exactly the same on that. I don't tell you, I start all my videos that are sponsored by saying I'm not going to give any opinion. I'm literally going to demonstrate how this product or a feature of this product works. If you think this is something you want to look into, there's a link in the description below. It's an affiliate link. And if you want to use it, you can. If not, no hard feelings. So I think I've always gone into it with an open and transparent outlook on it, because I think, again, as I said in the sort of like the last question, my reputation as being unbiased, honest, and open is more important to me than any money that a company will give me. If someone contacts me and says, we want to pay you for a review, I don't even reply to the emails. If I send something out, I've got a media kit, I send that out, and one of the first things it says in there is, I don't do reviews. I don't do paid reviews. Simple as that. There's no two ways about it. If you want to pay me money to do anything with your product, I've got to like it. Most of the time, I've got to board it myself in the first place, so I'm happy to even represent that product. And like I say, the third thing is I just don't do reviews that are being paid in any way, and I never will do paid reviews. I just think they are totally wrong. And again, it kind of leads my same thought process into me creating a product and then marketing my own product, as being the best thing since the last page builder or the last whatever, if that makes sense.
It always amazes me, because I get endless people emailing me. I'm always amazed at the terrible quality of outreach that I receive. It's not subtle at all. Like, we got this new product or this new service, we like to have a chat with you, which I'm totally open to. It's just that, we want to give you money so you have links on your website, or we give you, and I thought to myself, clear off, will you? I'm not going to do that for you.
I know.
I heard a rumor, and it was from a credible source. A credible source, Paul. And it was that Wix were in negotiation with Elementor to actually buy Elementor. I just wondered if you heard that rumor, and if it Or if you haven't, do you think it could be actually any element of truth? Because the reason why I thought was the source, and also it made certain business sense to me that Wix might be interested in Elementor.
Hey, look, at the end of the day, I mean, it would probably make a really good, sensible business decision for Wix to purchase Elementor, if they could do something like that. Do I think that's on the cards? I don't think so. Personally, I don't see that happening right now, because I think Elementor will have a big enough market share. When you think they're running something like 10 million websites, how many of that are paid? I don't know. But, they're running 10 million websites using Elementor. It is the biggest page builder on the market right now. I'm sure they've got a get out plan. This is our exit strategy, X number of years down the line. I mean, I've been told on numerous occasions that Yoni, the guy behind Elementor, he's got a plan several years in advance, and he's working towards that plan. What that plan is, I'm sure a very small number of people know, and that would be it. So, like I say, I think from a business point of view, from Wix, it would be the right thing to do. I think the fact that they had, was it 15 million in venture capital investment? Was it 2 years ago?
I think that was Elementor, but the thing is, Wix have got over $1 billion, and they're both Israeli-based companies, and Wix have just got a ton of money, Paul.
We need to talk after this and find out who your source is. Look, like I say, I could imagine it would make real business sense for probably both parties involved in it. Would it make right sense for the community that's around it? Probably not so much so. It's interesting. Let's just say it's interesting. I've not heard that rumor myself, so that is a new one on me. But we don't know. We don't know what's going on behind those closed doors. And like you say, when there's millions involved, like, everyone's got a price. Every company has a price, and every company that's worth its salt has that exit strategy, and that could be to sell to a big player in the market after you've got to a certain level of user base, or you've hit a certain threshold when it comes to your income and things like that. So who knows?
Well, in some ways, I think it might be a good thing for the WordPress community in general, because I think Automatic would have to back up their ideas. They would have to get real. Over to you, Stephen.
I think all that speculation is super interesting. I think it would make more sense for somebody like Shopify or something to come by Elementor than it would for a Wix. Somebody that has a corner of the market dominated, and if they could grab the WordPress e-commerce market and have some sort of API-driven interface inside of WordPress that interacts with the Shopify e-commerce market, you could do something really interesting there. And I think going that direction would I don't know. I'd be surprised if Elementor sells before they have the e-commerce thing solved. I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle and a huge revenue generating engine. So that's going to go ahead.
I think Elementor definitely have a lot further to go down the road yet for their own plans. I think they've still got a direction to go in, and I think they're going to follow that direction before they look at getting out of the market. And like you say, maybe that Shopify link would make more sense in the long term, because Shopify is massive. And let's be honest about it, when it comes to the e-commerce space in WordPress, it is literally just WooCommerce. Even though there are some other players out there, it's WooCommerce, simple as that. So if they could tap into that market and link the two together, like you say, Stephen, I think that could potentially be a really good sort of cross-platform relationship.
So at the present moment, in the Elementor, you've made your feelings clear about Gutenberg. In the Elementor world, what are some of your frustrations in that world and things that you think should or could be improved?
I wonder why you're leading me down this path. I've made my feelings very, very clear. I'm sure yourselves and many other people have seen, should we say, recently, especially recently. My biggest frustration with Elementor is I can see how good it can be, and I can see where some of the shortcomings are. And the frustration that I personally feel, and like I say, I'm only speaking personally, is I don't feel like they're realizing that vision. I think their path has changed from when version 2 was released. It released with dynamic content and it released with the theme builder. They were huge. They were game changing when it came to page builders at the time. Even though other ones were doing it, they weren't doing it at the same level and ease in which Elementor did it. But since then, I don't really feel like they've innovated. They've just sprinkled some nice little shiny things on top of what was already there. And I think this is where I'm probably most excited about looking at something like Brix, because that seems to be going more down the route of this is what people actually want to get the job done, which is a different market in WordPress to the market inside the likes of Wix. And I think we really need Elementor to get a fire lit up underneath them, should we say, to start innovating again, to start realizing the potential they have and cater to a market and not such a broad market. I mean, the problem I think at the moment is trying to be all things to all WordPress people. And the problem with that is you've got some people that are really happy because they've got, animated sort of transitions and lottie animations and things like that. And then on the other side, you've got people like myself and a lot of people in my Facebook group are really frustrated because they're going, well, we've got half of the WooCommerce side of things, for example. We've got half the features for working with dynamic content, but we've had them since version 2. When are we going to get the full complement of features so we can now leave those third-party plugins that are plugging those gaps that we have in this tool set? Because if you use Elementor, or if you've ever used it in the past, you'll know that every time an update comes out, it's scary because you are relying upon third-party tools to fill in some of the gaps. And for however long it may be, maybe a day or two, it could be weeks, there can be incompatibilities between those different things. And suddenly your site falls apart, or worst case scenario, you've got clients and their sites just stop working. You literally can't go out and do staging sites for every single client and run a test on it, make sure everything works. If you've got 100 clients and there's, say, 5 people in your team, that's not realistic. That's a complete waste of your time. So, there's a real need for taking those core things that you need and having those built into the likes of Elementor to remove our reliance from third-party tools. And I've said for a long time, I wish that Elementor or any page builder in the future was built on a modular system, because most of them release an API. And the whole point of that API is for third-party companies to come along and be able to tap into the core and expand what can be done. And that's exactly what a big chunk of the third-party plugin manufacturers around Elementor do. So for me, I would have loved to have seen Elementor be built around the core features you need to build a site. And then if you want to integrate WooCommerce and style all that and you have full control of that, then you plug in into the API the WooCommerce module. And then you have access to that, or you want the dynamic content. So you can mix and match all those components. But if you don't want any of those, you can have a really streamlined, lightweight page builder that then also does away with a lot of the problems that have been inherent with page builders, not just Elementor, and that's the bloat that comes with them. So these are some of my biggest frustrations with Elementor. And yes, I do give them a hard time. And I've been open about this. I've given them a hard time behind the scenes when I talk to people inside Elementor as well. So it's not something that I just do, even though some people say I just do it for on camera kind of thing. I've done it in more times than you'd believe. But it's born out of frustration, not because I think the product is bad. I think the product is great. I just think it's lacking and they don't seem to be filling those gaps. They would rather just sprinkle nice things on top and ignore those things that we actually need. And that's my biggest frustration with it.
I think it's time to wrap up the bonus content. Paul, you've been a fantastic guest. You have to come back. Hopefully in the new year, you agree to be a guest on the Friday roundtable show. We'd love you to come on that and be part of a special panelist and join us on that. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Like I say, thank you for your videos. I've learned a lot, and hopefully you'll be joining us in the new year. We'll be back next week with another great guest like Paul, folks. We'll see you soon. Bye.